Good morning and welcome to the new Saturday special episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. People ordinarily view science to be something antithetical to religion and religion inimical to science. To a great extent, is true in the sense that science bolsters spirit of inquiry, while religion by itself is against any spirit of inquiry, it's faith, faith, and faith. The reality is, if you go to the essentials, it's the other way around. As a matter of fact, science and religion inspire and instigate each other to go further down. One, inquiring, probing, finding out the reality. The other, acceptance. And majority of the people in the world believe in acceptance because they feel that being content is the way of happiness. Of course, that's not progressive. Of course, that negates the concept of a human being who must probe, must find out the reality, must not be content with what appears to be. Now let's take an example of Einstein, the most famous 20th century scientist, the person who gave the theory of relativity. And that theory of relativity has permeated all thoughts, all aspects of the human life. Not that it wasn't there, but it has been expressed in the most cogent and the logical manner by Einstein. So was he an atheist or was he a believer? Well, let me tell you very frankly, he was neither. And as a matter of fact, all great intellectuals are neither believers nor atheists. They are agnostic. They see things as they are, scrutinize them, and they might accept one part of a religion and might reject the other one. Where is the blind faith, they'll reject. Where is some possibility and probability of it being logical, of being able to answer why, how, where, then they'll accept it, even if partly. So was Einstein. The theoretical, basically he was a theoretical scientist, a physicist, and he never called himself an atheist. It was like Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett. So all these people never said that there is no God, never said there is no religion, but the concept of religion as it's evolving, as something constrained, something restraining, something restrictive, they would believe. As a matter of fact, they are all agnostics, skeptics. They don't accept things at the face value simply because a religious leader once said such and such is there. No. Put it up on the anvil of truth. And the anvil of truth, apart from being dissective, must answer two questions. Is it possible? Secondly, is it probable? Now, people normally confuse possible and probable. A thing may be possible but may not be probable. And thing may be probable but may not be possible. But any issue which is both probable and possible meets the end of the spirit of inquiry because further in-depth analysis would follow. But then first canon to be satisfied is it possible and probable? An agnostic believes in that. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Oriental philosophical traditions, look at the Upanishads. If you have read them, you will find they are all critical. They are not for acceptance. The Shastras, Shastra itself means arguments, for and against. Nothing is acceptable at the face value. And as a matter of fact, even the so-called icons of honesty were examined and found to be wanting. And people like Einstein believed that the God could never be understood through a rigmarole of religious and ritualistic mumbo jumbo. Now, I'm purposely using mumbo jumbo because a thing which cannot be explained is more like a mumbo jumbo. It's a shaman carrying out his ritualistic practice. There might be some truth in that, but if it's not capable of being analyzed and dissected, no. The concept of God, as conceived by Einstein, is similar to what was conceived earlier, that he is formless, Nirankar. The concept of God being having a form, when Christ says, or the Bible says, God created man in his own image. So you always consider God to be the shape of a man. Why? Why not the shape of a mouse? Did he not create a mouse? Did he not create a bat? Did he not create a snake? So why only think God in the shape of a man? God created man in his own image is absolutely unacceptable. And that is why Hindus, to get over this enigma and this hurdle, did not think of one God, they thought of gods. There's an elephant god, there is a Garuda, there is a snake, and so on and so forth. And that's why even if you look at the Vishnu avatars, they are absolutely scientific. Starting from the fish comes the modern man. But Guru Nanak, when he wrote Japji, which I discussed last week, was very clear. He called God to be Nirankar, formless. And Einstein firmly believed in that, and his belief was that God was a transcendental consciousness. So your consciousness, when it transcends all boundaries, is God, meaning thereby you are God. If you are aware of yourself, if you can identify your capabilities, you are God. The question is how to find God. That's another $1 million question. Einstein found God in the perfect symmetry of cosmos. His cosmic religion and distinct God of cosmic order do not fit in the agenda of religious believers, nor do they fit in with the tribal atheists who say there is no God. No. They are in fact a perfectly balanced view, and his highly evolved scientific brain never anthropomorphized God the way people do. He did not believe that God is somebody or something which controls everything. No. And that's why he never attended religious services. He never prayed. He could not conceive of a God who punished and rewarded people. And partly it was because he was a thoroughbred, thoroughgoing determinist. Now, determinist is a person who wants to determine for himself, who doesn't want something else to determine things for you, even if it's God. And Einstein repeatedly distanced himself from the very concept of a personal God. He didn't believe in a personal God. He refused a traditional Jewish burial. He was a Jew. And said, no, I don't want to be buried like a Jew. All in all, he was not very religious, but he was a great spiritual man. Now, here you have got to differentiate between being spiritual and between being religious. Spiritual is the person who is moralistic, who is ethical, who abhors war to the point of being a pacifist, and he was that. But he doesn't believe that there is a supreme deity who determines every damn thing. And the spiritual facet of Einstein's personal agenda underlines the one doesn't have to be oneself, and one doesn't have to tie oneself to the apple strings of any organized cult or religion whatsoever. And that is the high watermark of scientific inquiry. There might be good in any religion. So pick up the good from different religions. And from that point of view, what Akbar did, Akbar the Great, the Mughal emperor, and I know many people will object to the word the Great being used for Akbar, but he had, for the first time, thought as a Muslim leader in secular terms, and he formed Deen-e-Ilahi, which brought in the good points of both Hinduism and Christianity. So the spiritual facet of Einstein is similar. And his whole life, if you look at Einstein's life, was a living manifestation of the exalted spiritual concept of belief beyond religion. Beliefs are religion. In Persian, they call it Shavani. Shavanai is that concept, is basically Sufi concept. And they say, okay, you believe in something, but you don't have to go into the organized manner. And if you look at the Sufi poems and the Sufi music, it's absolutely against the fundamental Islam. Because fundamental Islam abhors music, and music is the lifeblood of Sufis. So the soil distant God is independent of all religions. Religions, in fact, is the chain which binds the concept of God. In reality, religion is an impediment to reaching and realizing God. And this is what Einstein wrote to his friend and fellow Nobel laureate Niels Bohr. An impediment to reaching and realizing God. So he didn't believe in religion as something binding, something altruistic, something good. And Einstein, one thing more, hated extremism both in belief and disbelief. And even when he said spirit of inquiry, he was not an extremist. I remember reading what he wrote in 1940 at the height of the Second World War. They are fanatical atheists whose intolerance is of the same kind as the intolerance of the religious fanatics. And atheists, of course, lap up the words written in a letter by Jewish philosopher Eric Gutkin. The word God, for me, is nothing more than the expression of the product of human weakness. The Bible, a collection of honorable but primitive legends that are pretty childish. Now, I fully believe that essentially God is a crutch for the mentally weak people, as a crutch is for the physically crippled person. So God is a mental crutch. And this is exactly what scientists like Einstein believe. But they do not go to the extent that you don't accept it. And the same atheist Einstein, who said that you can't reach God through religion, says in public that Sebastian Bach, Beethoven, and Brahma's ethereal creations were God's symphonies. So he found the spiritual content in the fifth symphony. I don't know whether you have heard it or not, but something great. A Bach, a Brahma's, ethereal. So Einstein's God was epitome of the highest moralistic virtue and values. His God was in fact a metaphor for immaculate existence and a spotless spirit of heavenly blissfulness. The reality is that Einstein saw God as ultimate compass of the universal rectitude and perfection. I'm not saying morality, I'm saying rectitude. And he could strike an excellent balance between theism and antitheism. And that's why his amorphous spiritual fruity is happy atheistic to non-believers and very satisfying theistic to the believers. So he can cater to both. To sum up, like his famous theory of relativity again, Einstein's God was a relative concept, fiercely subjective perception, but not a part of the universal belief system. And that is the reality. And when I talk of that, look at it. The inspiration from the astronauts reading Old Testament scriptures on Sputniks and spaceships is by itself a great thing. I saw an exhibit, Discovery and Revelation, Religion, Science and Making of Things. It was a Smithsonian Institute. And I was impressed. For example, the Apollo 8 flight manual opened the passage for the first chapter of Genesis and says that this mission is a mission of discovery and revelation. So the religion, if it promotes, informs, instructs a spirit of inquiry, is acceptable and was acceptable to Einstein. If it was changed, then of course it was not. So Einstein is the ultimate, or rather the finest example of the reality of the situation. And that is, everything has to be examined. And if it's probable, it may not be, you cannot test it. It might remain a hypothesis, but then it's acceptable. And if something is zany, eerie, weird, reject it. God as conceived of a person is to be rejected, according to Einstein, and of course me. God as an epitome of the ultimate human consciousness is to be accepted. Religion, absolutely no, no. Basically, organized religion is like a cult at the behest of the priests and the class. And that's why the wars have taken place in the name of religion. Whether you think of the Crusades or any other war, when religion comes into the picture, it assumes a different face altogether, a different form altogether. So Einstein's concept of God and religion is a fine opening into this fight between, or the conflict between, theists and atheists. Ultimately, agnosticism, where healthy spiritualism, infused with the spirit of inquiry, is the salvation of intelligent people, intelligent minds, wide awake minds. Thank you.